On today's show, NBA GMs believe the Rockets are one of the most unpredictable teams this upcoming season. Plus, is the Houston young core being slept on? It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best ways that you can help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and also drop us a comment while you're there. Just do a drive-by and say go Rockets. It helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, slacking off from work maybe a little bit. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. On today's show, the annual NBA GM survey has been released, a set of 50 questions asked anonymously to the GMs of the association, and the Rockets had a fair bit of representation in this survey, some good, some maybe not so good. So we're going to tackle what GMs had to say about the Rockets in this survey, and then a little bit later on in the episode, and we might also tackle some of the non-Rockets questions in the survey, because there were a couple in here that were a bit of a doozy. So might tackle it if we've got some time. And then later, going to discuss the starting lineup for the second preseason game against the OKC Thunder, assuming Fred VanVleet is likely to be sitting this next game per Ime Udoka. Who should get the start in place of Fred VanVleet, assuming Dillon Brooks is back in the starting lineup after resting the first game? Should it be Sheppard or should it be Amen Thompson? And we're going to get to that a little bit later on in the episode. But let's start with the GM survey, because GMs don't really know what to make of the Houston Rockets. The question was, and this is what we're starting with, the question was, which team's level of success this season is toughest to predict? The Rockets were tied for second place with the New Orleans Pelicans with 13% of the available votes. The only team ahead of the Rockets and Pelicans were the Lakers at 17% of the available votes. So it goes Lakers, 17%, Rockets and Pelicans, 13%. Fourth place, Phoenix Suns at 10%. And then tied for fifth place, the Mavericks and the 76ers, both with 7% of the vote. Now, there are a few other teams in there: Nuggets, Pacers, Clippers. Bunch of other teams got some vote consideration. We won't worry about all those. Last year, the team that was toughest to predict was the 76ers, who had 30% of the available votes. So it's a little bit more spread out this year. So what do we make of this? What do we make of GMs not knowing what to make of the Houston Rockets? I think what it says is that GMs don't really know what to make of the Rockets' young core yet, right? Obviously, the Rockets just took a substantial leap in the standings last season, coming off a 19-win improvement from 22 to 41 wins, finished with a 500 record last year. But largely, and this has been a talking point for a while now, the Rockets' success this season is going to be so largely dependent on the internal growth and development of the young core. Like, if the Rockets make it to the playoffs this season, if they're in the play-in tournament, if they lock up the sixth seed, if they jump in, and if they're the party crashers that we expect and hope them to be this season, look, it's not going to be because of Fred VanVleet. It's not going to be because of Dillon Brooks. It's not going to be because of Jeff Green or Steven Adams. Now, yes, all of those guys are going to play important roles on this Rockets team, but this team only goes so far as the young core will take them. This team only goes so far as Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason and Amen and Cam and Reed, to a lesser degree since he's coming in as a rookie. He's going to have a slightly smaller role than the other guys. But what I'm getting at here is I think that's why the GMs don't really know how to predict the Rockets' level of success this year. Because look, if Alperen Sengun levels up again and plays at like a true blue bona fide all-star level, gets an all-star selection, all that good stuff in the Western Conference, if Jalen Green is closer to the March version of himself this go around to start the season, then this Rockets team could be vying for, a 50-win some odd season, right? And that is an incredibly successful team. That's yet another really substantial jump in the win column. And then the Rockets look like one of the most young, exciting, up-and-coming teams in the NBA if it all goes right. And they've got so much young talent. But one of the biggest questions, maybe the biggest question surrounding this Rockets team is we just don't know yet, right? We don't know a lot about these young players. We know that Sengun is the closest thing they have to an all-star right now. He's put up all-star level production as of last season. But we don't know if Sengun can truly be the best player on a contending team just yet. We don't know. We hope. And this season is going to give us a better picture of whether or not that's true. We don't know what Jalen Green is going to be. We've seen the highs. We've also seen the lows. We've seen the inconsistency, right? So there's so many questions about this Rockets team. I think that's why it makes it so hard to predict for GMs when looking at the Rockets to try and see, okay, well, where are they going to ultimately land this year? I think it's really easy to point at the Rockets and say, well, they're going to at least be better this year. But the question really comes down to how much better are they going to be? I don't think they're in danger of regressing. I don't think they're going to be worse than 41 wins. But you also compare and contrast that to the state of the Western Conference, the level of competition out there. Are the Rockets 5 wins better this year? Are they 10 wins better? And again, all of that hinges on the young core and how good guys like Alp and Jalen can be this season. So I found that really, really interesting. And again, Lakers at the top of the list because Lakers could go either way, right? Lakers could be a dark horse candidate to win the title, and Lakers could also flame out and maybe not even make the playoffs at all. Honestly, I guess the range between possible outcomes for the Lakers is a chasm. Is that the word I want? I don't know. I'm going to go with chasm. So the other question here that I took a little bit of an exception to, which team has the most promising young core? Now, I don't think you can take any issue with the number one team on this list, and that's the OKC Thunder. With 60% of the votes, the OKC Thunder walked away. That's fair. They also won last year's poll with 73% of the available votes. Honestly, not even mad about that. Look, they've got SGA. They've got the best young player on this entire list, minus Victor Wembanyama for the Spurs. But he's already an MVP caliber player. He's already one of the top 5, top 3 players in the NBA, and they've got an immense amount of talent up and down the roster. I don't really take an issue with that. Second place on the list, though, the Orlando Magic. With 20% of the available votes. The Rockets clocked in at third with 10% of the available votes. The Spurs clocked in at fourth place with 7% of the available votes. Victor Wembanyama doing a lot of heavy lifting on that one. I don't know how you look at the Magic and the Rockets rosters and rank the Magic young core higher than the Houston Rockets young core. And I'm trying my best to take my red tinted shades off and be unbiased when looking at this. Paolo Banchero and Alperen Sengun, I think it's kind of a wash at this point. And I could make a pretty good faith argument that Alperen Sengun is actually a better player than Paolo Banchero right now. I don't think that would be that much of a stretch to say. I feel like I could make that argument, and I feel like there are points that I could make unpacking in a whole episode. And then Franz Wagner, maybe he's better than like whoever the number 2 is on the young core of the Houston Rockets right now. But when you start looking at things like potential and future ceiling, and again, this is why these surveys are so intentionally ambiguous, because are they looking at like future potential outlook? Because I think like when you look at guys like Amen Thompson and Reed Sheppard and Cam Whitmore, like in what world would you pick the Orlando Magic young core over the Houston Rockets young core? I just can't wrap my head around it. I thought that was kind of a slight to the Rockets, and I'm very curious your thoughts. How do you feel about the Orlando Magic young core being ranked ahead of the Houston Rockets young core? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. I'll tell you what, though. One member of the young core that the NBA GMs were incredibly fond of is Reed Sheppard. More on that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. Because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back, right, from your true potential. I'm somebody that's done therapy in the past, and I found it to be an incredibly kind of cathartic experience to have an unbiased professional third party help walk me through some of the stuff that I was dealing with in my day-to-day life. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so even though GMs are maybe a little bit down on the Houston Rockets young core, one guy that they are not down on is Reed Sheppard, Isaiah Reed Sheppard, IRS, the tax man himself. When asked who will win the 2024-2025 Rookie of the Year award, with 50% of the available votes, Reed Sheppard walked away as the overwhelming favorite to win the award. In the number 1 spot, Zach Edey clocked in at number 2 with 30% of the available votes for Memphis. And then Stephon Castle took 13% of the available votes for the San Antonio Spurs. And then also, when asked which rookie will be the best player in 5 years, the overwhelming majority of votes went to Reed Sheppard, walking away with almost half of the available votes. 43%, Reed Sheppard, by a country mile, first place. Second place, Stephon Castle with 17%. Third place, Zachary Risacher with 13% of the available votes. And then tied for fourth place, Bub Carrington and Alex Sarr, both for the Wizards, with 7% of the available votes. First off, I was really surprised that Matas Buzelis is like nowhere on this list. I had no idea that GMs were, I guess, so down on him. I still think he is like legitimately the dark horse to be heavily in the mix for Rookie of the Year outside of Reed and Zach Edey. Honest to God, I really think Matas Buzelis is going to be like, I'm calling it right now. I think those are your finalists for Rookie of the Year. I cannot sit here and say for certainty that I think Reed is going to win it. If things play out the way that I think they do for Memphis and Zach Edey doesn't like get, 30 plus minutes a night or whatever, if he's hovering around 24, 25 a night as a starter and Reed can kind of close the gap from the numbers, whatever. I think the finalists are going to be Reed, Zach Edey, and Matas Buzelis for Rookie of the Year. That's my prediction right here. But it's really cool that the GMs kind of recognize how good Reed Sheppard is, and it's interesting to see just how highly they value him compared to some of his peers, right? I could understand if it was like a little bit closer in the Rookie of the Year race, or I could understand if it was a little bit closer in, who do you think is going to be the best player in 5 years, that kind of thing. But the fact that an overwhelming majority of GMs look at Reed Sheppard and they think, damn, yeah, he's going to be really good. He's going to be the best player in 5 years. That is incredibly high praise from the guys who are literally in charge of pulling the strings and making the decisions for all 30 teams in the association. So even though the GMs might be a little down as a whole on the Houston Rockets young core comparatively to teams like the Thunder and the Magic, Reed Sheppard is doing a lot of heavy lifting in the regard of, I guess, or in the eyes of opposing GMs. And I wonder how this works. I wonder if Rafael Stone's allowed to vote for his own players. I feel like that has to be like a rule where the GMs are not allowed to vote on their, does this say? Not permitted to vote for their own team or personnel. There we go. Yeah, I figured that would be included at the top. I feel like I've read that before, and I don't know why I was even like considering it as like a weird possibility. But anyways, Reed Sheppard with some, high praise from opposing executives. And again, I think it matches the eye test. When you see and when you kind of envision what Reed Sheppard's role is going to look like as he grows with this Houston Rockets team, I don't see how he doesn't walk away as the best player from that draft. Look, no slight to Risacher, no slight to Alex Sarr. I think both of those guys are going to have strong, good NBA careers. But when we look back at the 2024 NBA draft, I think people are going to be appalled at the fact that Reed Sheppard fell to 3 and that both of those organizations overlooked him. And he's probably going to be, not probably, I feel very confident saying he's going to be a legit star player in the NBA. Now, how quickly that happens, how quickly he emerges and eventually takes the reins as the future starting point guard for the Rockets, TBD on all of that, right? Maybe they slow play it. Maybe he comes off the bench for the first couple seasons before he takes over for Fred VanVleet. Who knows? But the talent is absolutely there. The work ethic is there. The drive is there. The skills are all there. I think Reed has a really, really bright future. And so do the NBA executives at hand. Now, some of the other questions in here, some of the other poll questions in here, I thought were really interesting. One of them was, if you were starting a franchise today and you could sign any player in the NBA, who would it be? And obviously the number one answer on this list was Victor Wembanyama. Like, there was a question posed in a Locked On Roundtable, minor spoilers here, of if you could trade your entire team, all 15 signed players, whatever, and all future draft assets for Victor Wembanyama, would you do it? And all 4 teams, I guess, that were posited this question, all said yes, myself included. I hate saying it out loud, but that's just facts. Would you do it? And unfortunately, Spurs still probably say no. As incredibly talented as the Rockets' young core is, and as incredibly talented as the entire roster is, Wemby is that much of a game changer. He's going to go down as a future Hall of Famer. I hate it. It's gross. And it sucks that he went to San Antonio, but that's just how good he is, right? So if you were starting a franchise today and could sign any player in the NBA, who would it be? 77% of the votes went to Victor Wembanyama. 10% went to Nikola Jokic and SGA, so a tie there. And then only 3% of the votes went to Luka Doncic. I thought that one was kind of crazy, honestly. I don't know if it's recency bias or what, or maybe, I really don't know. I don't know how you take SGA over Luka. Maybe it's a play style thing, right? We saw some of this kind of downplaying of talent and ability during the James Harden era, right? Where a lot of executives, a lot of coaches, GMs, whatever, they kind of, I don't know if it was a lack of appreciation or what. People really just didn't like James Harden. They didn't give him his due when he was in his prime and when he was doing the crazy stuff that he was doing. And I feel like a lot of that is happening to Luka right now. Not that I want to shed any sympathy or any tears for a member of the Dallas Mavericks, but I find it absurd that Luka only got 3% of the available votes. That's honestly kind of crazy to me. Now, some of the other categories in which the Houston Rockets were also represented, although kind of, lesser categories overall. Amen Thompson was ranked the 3rd most athletic player in the NBA behind Anthony Edwards and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So that's some exciting company there. And then Fred VanVleet was ranked 4th among players that would be best suited for a head coaching position down the line. Chris Paul clocked in at number 1 in that category, which I thought was easily, if you were to look at active NBA players and who would make the best head coach, it's absolutely Chris Paul. He is going to be coaching an NBA team one day. The only question is not if, but when. Actually, maybe if. I don't know if Chris wants to be a head coach one day, but he'd probably be a damn good head coach if he were to embrace that role down the line. So wanted to tackle a few of those different categories. One other one here that the Rockets did get some representation in, which head coach has the best defensive schemes, and Ime Udoka clocked in at 7th with 3% of the available votes. So there were, how many head coaches ahead of him? 6? Spoelstra number 1, Finch and Tom Thibodeau number 2, or tied for number 2, Joe Mazzulla number 4, Daignault with OKC for number 5, and then Jamal Mosley at number 6. So hopefully that number can skyrocket a little bit for Ime Udoka going into next season. We'll see if he's able to elevate the Houston Rockets defense from top 10 this past year into that top 5 category this upcoming season. And there are a handful of categories in here that you would imagine some of the younger Rockets would definitely be in play for next season. Like, who's the best perimeter defender in the NBA right now? It's Drew Holiday at 43% of the available votes. Second place, Alex Caruso. Third place, Herb Jones. Assuming success this season and depending on how large of a role he gets, I feel like Amen Thompson is going to be on this list next season. And Amen could also very well be on the most versatile defender list next season. Giannis winning the award for that one on the voting list this year with 17% of the available votes. Although I feel like Bam Adebayo got slighted a little bit. Bam is a really, really good defender, and I don't think he often gets the credit that he ultimately deserves. But if you're interested in checking out the GM list, go check it out. It's available on the NBA website. You can go through all 50 of the available questions. Coming up, who should start for the Houston Rockets in preseason game number 2 against the OKC Thunder? Reed Sheppard or Amen Thompson? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at all the different wagers that you can get your hands on, like different season leaders, division winners, season awards, or just the outright favorites to win the Super Bowl. Right now, the Chiefs plus 500, the 49ers plus 700, the Ravens plus 750, and then in a 3-way tie for 4th place favorite odds, the Detroit Lions, the Buffalo Bills, and your Houston Texans plus 1,100 to win it all this season. So for all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. We're going to get into, I guess, I don't want to say predictions, it's preseason, but we'll start with the starting lineup stuff involving Reed versus Amen, and then maybe a couple other things to look out for or highlight about the Rockets' second preseason game against the OKC Thunder. So first and foremost, the expectation, at least in my mind, is that all the guys who did rest game 1 of the preseason, I'm expecting them to probably be active here in game 2. So again, for a quick refresher, that means Dillon Brooks, Jock Landale, Jeff Green, Tari Eason. I would imagine all 4 of those guys are likely to be active here in game 2. And then the 2 guys that we expected to rest at some point, Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams, those 2 guys will likely be sitting out of this one. Now, Ime originally said he was going to do 3 guys the first game, 3 guys the next game. I don't know if it's because he wanted to have a little bit more depth, a little bit more to work with in game number 2, what have you, but he rested 4 guys the first night. We'll see if he still elects to rest more guys besides just Fred and Steven Adams, but I feel like those 2 guys are a pretty safe bet to not participate in this second game of the preseason, which is unfortunate because Fred was out there wheeling and dealing with the dimes in game 1, and he is, provides the steady hand and leadership that this Rockets team definitely still needs from him on the floor on a nightly basis. And then Steven Adams, albeit despite some of the defensive deficiencies in game 1, moving a little bit slow on that end of the basketball, the screens were absolutely massive in unlocking offensive potential for this Rockets team. So those 2 guys, assuming they're both sitting, will be sorely missed. Now, that being said, if Dillon Brooks is active and returning, then he's likely back in the starting lineup, leaves you 1 empty spot. So you've got Jalen, Dillon, Jabari, Alp in the starting lineup. Who gets that 5th spot? Is it going to be Amen Thompson or is it going to be Reed Sheppard? Conventional wisdom would say Reed Sheppard because he plays the same position as Fred VanVleet. He's the point guard. You plug him in and he spaces the floor. He does a lot of very similar things as Fred VanVleet. He can bring the ball up, initiate offense. He can space, play him off ball. You basically don't skip a beat, right? Essentially, you play the same way with Reed that you do with Fred. It would make a lot of sense. On the other hand, Amen Thompson is really, really good. and he gives you a lot of switchability. He gives you 2 elite point of attack defenders in the starting lineup with Amen himself, obviously, and then Dillon Brooks back in the starting lineup. He gives you a lot of versatility trying to guard the OKC lineup, which, I mean, shoot. There was a report by an OKC report, I cannot remember the name, who said that Mark Daignault's intention, I guess, is to have everybody play in this game against the Rockets. So it sounds like it's going to be a bit of a dress rehearsal for OKC. Doesn't seem like it's going to be that way for the Rockets. Although, again, maybe if OKC is doing a whole dress rehearsal thing, then maybe this conversation is moot, and maybe Ime Udoka decides to run everybody out for the second preseason game because he wants to get a good look at how his roster looks in its entirety against the OKC roster in their entirety. So, however, I will say, if Ime goes with Amen over Reed Sheppard, first off, I don't think it's like a slight or anything to Reed Sheppard. I think, if anything, what it would say is I think it would say that Ime Udoka has a lot of faith and a lot of trust in Amen Thompson to not just be the off-ball player that he was last season. Obviously, that was his role. That's where he excelled at. That's what the Rockets asked of him last season. But already in game 1 and already through training camp and everything, we've seen a new version of Amen Thompson. We've seen him with a tighter handle. He looks more confident, more comfortable, more sure of himself, making moves on the floor. He looked fantastic in game 1 against the Jazz. And the opportunities that he got, especially in the half court where he was able to dribble, get downhill and dribble, penetrate and make reads and try to create for his teammates or score the ball himself, they all looked really solid. Like last season, he looked a little shaky, especially in the half court at times. So if Amen gets tapped to be the replacement starter for Fred, I think obviously it makes a lot of sense because Amen brings a lot to the table. He's got also a little bit more experience than Reed, and you keep Reed in kind of his role as the backup, right? You don't throw a ton of responsibility on him in game 2 of the preseason. Hey, you're out there starting. Good luck, kid. Even though I'm sure he could handle it. But I think it speaks more about what Ime's confidence in Amen, because at that point, Jalen is likely your primary ball handler, but Amen is your secondary, right? And even then, Amen can be your primary ball handler. And I think that wouldn't happen, right? Ime wouldn't put Amen Thompson out there and leave Jalen Green on an island as, I guess, the only ball handler if he didn't feel confident in Amen's ability to run the offense, right? To take some of that pressure off of Jalen Green. So if I had to wager between Reed and Amen, I'm going to say it's Amen Thompson. I feel pretty confident in that. I know that Ime loves Amen so much. And even though he's incredibly high on Reed Sheppard too, I think it's going to be Amen Thompson if Fred VanVleet is sitting. So that's my final call on what happens with the starting lineup. Now, pardon me for that. Elsewhere for this game, the number one thing that I'm looking for, and, we can go back to the Jazz game to take a look at this, but, that second quarter, as fun as it was, as exciting as that second quarter was, Rockets scored 40 points. They gave up 37 to the Jazz. I need to see them be able to lock down a little bit better on the defensive end, and that should be a lot easier to do getting back Dillon Brooks and Tari Eason. Getting back 2 of your best defenders is going to help your defense considerably. But I don't get into a shootout with OKC, right? Don't get into a run and gun, high octane, no defense being played shootout with the Thunder. Because I don't know if I like the Rockets' chances in a shootout with OKC. They're a much more talented offensive squad than the Rockets are, at least on paper as it stands right now. And again, this is going to be an ongoing battle. How does the Rockets' defense look with the increased pace of play? The other thing for me is I want to see a little bit more, I guess, consistency with the offense. It felt like the Rockets hit some major lulls with their offensive production. Obviously, they had the huge second quarter, right? But the first quarter felt pretty disjointed and kind of wonky. Put up 22 points. It wasn't great. And then the third quarter, I thought the Rockets, they kept the scoreboard moving a little bit, but it really felt like they were kind of disjointed and it wasn't flowing super great offensively. And unfortunately, if Fred's not playing, it's going to make things a lot harder offensively point blank period, because he does a great job setting guys up. But some of it's going to have to come from, obviously Jalen's scoring burst in the second quarter was incredible, but it feels like he needs to be a little bit more consistent across quarters, right? He had 19 points at halftime. He only scored 2 more points in that third quarter. I think he played about 6 more minutes and he only scored 2 points. He went 0 of 3 from downtown in that quarter. So not getting complacent, right? Not relying on, okay, hey, I was bombing a bunch of threes in the second quarter, I'm going to keep bombing threes in the third. No, because that's how you kind of, that's how you fall into that trap of falling in love too much with that 3-point shot, right? And that can apply to everybody on the roster, right? Do your work, attack, collapse the defense, generate high quality looks. Don't just settle for looks from the 3-point line. And again, that's not just a Jalen thing. That extends to the entire team, right? I want to see, how much they play through Alperen Sengun. If Fred VanVleet's not out there, how much of the offense goes through LP in game 2, right? We know that LP can be a huge focal point of the offense. He really wasn't in game 1, right? He was a great play finisher, and he was the final piece of a lot of those actions, but they didn't really run a lot of offense through Alperen Sengun in game 1. Now, some of that might just be because they know that already works, and so they don't feel the need to practice it or highlight it in preseason, and they're going to get to it when the regular season comes around. Maybe it's just a stylistic difference in how Ime Udoka wants to run the team this season. Who knows? But I'm excited for game 2, excited to see the guys back in action yet again. I want your thoughts. Who should start with Fred VanVleet sitting, assuming he sits? Should it be Reed Sheppard? Should it be Amen Thompson? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Let me know your thoughts on the NBA GM survey stuff that we talked about in the first 2 segments. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. And remember, the best way you can help our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing. Like and comment on YouTube, and like and subscribe on YouTube, and also comment. All those good stuff, all those good things. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.